Welcome to the AI Samachar. It's January 17th, 2025, and we've got a pretty fascinating deep dive lined up for you today.
Yeah, should be fun.
Pulling from a bunch of different sources today. Like we've got the Hindu, Business Standard, Mint,
Oh, nice.
all sorts of stuff. Politics, agriculture, tech, even a little bit of philosophy today.
Sounds like a good mix.
Yeah, so let's jump right in. This first story really caught my eye. The Election Commission just put out this advisory, right? And it's saying that all the political parties have to disclose and label any content that's AI generated that they're using in their campaigns. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, it's a pretty big deal when you think about it. AI can really easily blur the lines between what's real and what's, fabricated.
Right.
I mean, think about deep fakes.
Oh, yeah.
Where they can use AI to make these super realistic videos, but they're totally fake.
Oh, totally. And it's scary how real they can look these days.
Yeah, and that could totally be used to manipulate voters. Like erode the public's trust in what they're seeing.
Yeah, erode trust in the whole system.
Exactly. So this advisory from the Election Commission, that's a big step towards keeping things transparent and honest, making sure our democracy stays, democratic.
Right. And it's not just a theoretical thing either, right?
No, definitely not.
Like, we're already seeing this play out in the real world. There was this FIR filed against the AADMI party.
You heard of that?
For allegedly using AI-generated pictures of the prime minister in their campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, this stuff is happening now.
Oh, yeah. It's a real issue. And it just goes to show that AI is advancing so fast that our laws and ethics, they have to keep up.
Right, totally agree. It's a question for the whole world, not just India.
Yeah.
Like, how do we balance freedom of expression with protecting ourselves from misinformation? Especially in this, age of AI.
Huge question.
Yeah, a really big one. Okay, but let's shift gears a bit. This next story is really cool and actually pretty inspiring.
Okay, I like those.
Have you heard about these drone didis in Tamil Nadu?
Oh, yeah. That was such a cool story. What a great example of how technology can really empower people,
Totally. So for people who haven't heard about this, it's this group of women who are learning how to fly drones.
Wow.
To do all these different agricultural tasks.
That's amazing.
Like spraying fertilizers, checking on crop health, things like that.
Yeah. And it's not just about the cool tech, right? It can make farming so much more efficient and, better for the environment.
Exactly. And think about how much money they could save.
Right? The cost savings would be huge.
Yeah. And India has to feed a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that can help increase crop yields, that's a big deal.
Absolutely. And, one of the things that really struck me about that story was how one of the women was talking about, using the drones to meet even more the farmers' needs.
Oh, yeah.
She had this real entrepreneurial spirit. It was so cool.
Right. She saw this technology. She's like, okay, how can we do even more with this?
Exactly. It's not just replacing jobs. It's about creating new opportunities, especially in rural areas. I love that.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of the economy, Reliance Industries just had a really strong third quarter.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Business Standard had a whole report on it.
Yeah.
A lot of growth driven by their digital services and the retail side.
That makes sense. Even with everything that's happened post-COVID, the Indian economy seems to be doing pretty well.
Yeah, especially leaning into the whole digital side of things.
Yeah.
And consumers seem to have more money to spend.
Right.
But we got to be real too, right? There are definitely some worries about a possible slowdown in spending. CMIE, the Center for Monitoring Indian Economy.
Mm-hmm.
They're reporting some pretty disappointing numbers when it comes to new projects getting started.
Yeah, it's not all sunshine and rainbows, right? Well, you have to look at the global picture, too.
Right.
There's a lot of uncertainty in the world economy right now. Mint had a good analysis on that.
Right.
And that can have a ripple effect on everyone,
Yeah, definitely. Something to keep in mind for our listeners, too. Stay informed about these trends because it could really impact your own personal finances.
Totally. So, pay attention to what's happening out there.
Okay, so let's talk about a challenge that's been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
Tuberculosis.
Oh, right.
Huge problem, but there's been a major breakthrough with this new treatment. It's way shorter than the old ones, and it could really change the game. But there's also this whole issue of drug resistance, which is kind of worrying.
Yeah, it's a big deal. This new regimen, the BPLL, it's only 6 months. That's huge.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Think about all the people who had to go through these long, difficult treatments before.
Yeah.
And the cost.
Yeah.
TB puts such a burden on people, not just physically, but financially, too.
Totally. But one of the sources mentioned that we got to be super careful because there are already signs of resistance to bedaquiline popping up.
Yeah, I read about that.
It means we can't just celebrate the new treatment. We have to keep monitoring the situation, doing more research.
Definitely. This isn't just an Indian issue either.
Right, it's a global one.
It affects the whole world, especially countries where TB is really widespread.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so now for something completely different. I was reading Mint, and I saw this book review.
Oh, cool.
It was for a book called Open Socrates.
Okay.
And it's about how, get this, ancient philosophy is still relevant to our lives today.
Interesting. So, like, what would Socrates have to say to us tech-obsessed people in 2025?
Right. I mean, he was the original philosopher.
Yeah, well, the book seems to be saying that we should always be questioning things, like our assumptions about the world, engaging in depth thought, just like Socrates did.
Right.
He was famous for challenging people, making them think critically, and that's something we need now more than ever.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's this great line in the review. It describes Socrates as a midwife of ideas, helping people give birth to new ways of thinking.
I love that.
It's such a cool image, right?
Oh, yeah. It shows how philosophy isn't just about, memorizing stuff. It's about actually using those ideas.
Right. Applying them to your life, the decisions you make.
Exactly. It's about how you see the world.
That's some serious food for thought. And that wraps up the first part of our deep dive into the AI Samachar for today. We'll be back with more insights in just a moment. And we're back with more from the AI Samachar. So, with all this talk about technology, it's nice to see some of it being used for, well, good.
Yeah, what do you mean?
I was reading about this wave of eco-friendly projectors that are hitting the market.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, like they're using way less energy and they're designed to be much more environmentally friendly.
That's awesome. I mean, we all need to be thinking about sustainability these days.
Right, especially businesses and schools and stuff. Everyone's trying to reduce their carbon footprint, so this is a good step.
Definitely. Small steps, big impact. Speaking of big picture stuff, did you see the World Bank report that just came out?
Oh, the one about India's economic growth. Yeah, I saw that.
It looks like they're predicting things might cool down a bit. They're estimating around 6.5% growth for the 2024-25 fiscal year.
That's a little lower than some people were expecting, right?
Yeah, and they pointed to a couple of reasons for that. There might be a slowdown in investments, and there's been some weakness reported in the manufacturing sector.
Okay, so not all good news on the economic front. But they did say the services sector is doing okay.
Yeah, that seems to be holding steady. And actually, there are some positive signs for agriculture. They're projecting a recovery there.
Okay, so like a mixed bag. But overall, it sounds like the Indian economy is pretty resilient. And speaking of resilience, there's that really amazing story out of Odisha.
Oh, yeah, after Cyclone Dana.
Right, like that whole thing exposed some serious problems with those multi-purpose shelters they have.
Yeah, that is pretty bad.
But the good news is the Odisha government is actually doing something about it. They're completely overhauling the system to make sure those shelters are ready for the next disaster.
That's great to hear. They're actually putting their money where their mouth is.
Yeah, exactly. They're saying they're going to make sure the shelters have electricity, they're maintained properly, really investing in disaster preparedness.
I mean, that's a huge step. It shows they're learning from what happened and taking steps to protect people.
Yeah, for sure. It's a good reminder that sometimes you have to go through something tough to make things better in the future. Okay, switching gears back to the tech world, there's some news about Hindenburg Research.
Oh, wow, those guys.
Remember them? The ones who dropped that huge report about the Adani Group.
Yeah, the short seller that everyone was talking about.
Well, it seems they're shutting down. The founder, Nathan Anderson, is moving on to focus on financial fraud investigations.
Really? Makes you wonder what he's got up his sleeve.
Right. Maybe he's onto something even bigger. Okay, but speaking of aiming big, did you hear about this new internship program the Indian government is starting?
Oh, yeah, the one where they want to give skills training to, a ton of young people.
Yeah, it's crazy. They're aiming to skill, 1 crore youth. That's 10 million. And then place them in internships with all these top companies.
That's ambitious over the next 5 years, too.
Yeah, it's a huge undertaking. But, think about the impact, right? It's a massive investment in the future workforce.
Yeah, and closing that gap between what you learn in school and what you actually need to know to get a job.
Right, getting real-world experience, that's so important these days.
Absolutely. It makes people way more employable. Speaking of the economy, have you been hearing all the buzz about the union budget?
Oh, yeah, it's that time of year again, right? Everyone's speculating about what's going to happen.
I've heard rumors about tax breaks for the middle class.
Ooh, like what?
There's talk about exempting interest income from fixed deposits.
Okay, that would make a lot of people happy.
Ugh.
But then I also heard something about maybe scrapping some of the exemptions
Yeah.
under the old tax system.
Yeah, it seems like the government really wants people to switch over to the new tax system.
Right. But it's a tough balance.
Yeah,
They're trying to be fair, but also keep the economy growing.
exactly. And then you've got everyone calling for more spending on things like infrastructure and healthcare.
So many competing demands.
It's like a giant puzzle, trying to figure out how to make everyone happy and move the country forward.
Yeah. Good luck with that one. Okay, let's talk about something that's been causing some debate lately. Mandatory attendance in college.
Oh yeah, the UGC is thinking about making it a requirement, right?
Yeah, like you have to attend a certain percentage of your classes to be allowed to take your exams.
It's kind of tricky.
Right. Like, I get why they want to do it. They want to make sure students are actually showing up and learning.
Right.
But at the same time, shouldn't college students be able to make their own decisions? Like, what if someone has a job or family responsibilities or something?
I mean, maybe there's a way to do it that's more flexible. Take individual situations into account.
Yeah, that'd be good. We'll see what they come up with. Okay, last one for this segment. Some international drama. President Trump and TikTok.
Oh, right, that whole thing?
Remember when they were talking about banning it?
Yeah, all those national security concerns.
Well, now it seems like Trump is trying to figure out a way to, like, preserve TikTok.
Interesting. So keep it around, but make sure it's safe.
Yeah, trying to walk that fine line.
We'll have to see what happens with that one.
Yeah, definitely a story to follow. Okay, well, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into the AI Samachar for today. We'll be right back with more thought-provoking news after a short break. We're back for the final part of the AI Samachar. It's been a wild ride today, huh?
Yeah, we've covered so much.
Politics, the economy, drones, philosophy, you name it. But before we call it a day, there are a couple more stories I wanted to hit.
Okay, let's hear them.
This one about India's space program really blew my mind.
Oh, yeah. ISRO has been doing some pretty amazing stuff lately.
Okay, so they just did this successful docking trial run.
Right, for their SpaceX program, the space docking experiment.
Space docking. Oh, I'm sorry, but that just sounds so cool. Can you explain, like, why is this such a big deal?
It's huge. I mean, it means India can now rendezvous and dock spacecraft in orbit.
Wow.
Like, that opens up so many possibilities.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Okay, think about building space stations, going on even more complicated deep space missions.
Oh, wow.
Even like repairing satellites in orbit, refueling them. It's a whole new level.
It's incredible to see how far we've come with space exploration. And India's right there on the cutting edge.
It's so inspiring. Makes you wonder what we'll be able to do in the future.
Right. Okay, but let's come back down to Earth for a minute. There's something else I wanted to talk about, something I think is really important. The role of women in Indian politics.
Yeah, that's a big one. We've made some progress, definitely, like with voter registration and stuff.
Right.
But we still have a long way to go when it comes to women actually holding elected office.
Yeah, it's a complex problem.
Yeah.
No easy answers. But I'm glad that there are so many organizations working to empower women and get them more involved in the political process.
Me too. The more voices we have at the table, the better.
Exactly. Okay, and this kind of ties into the last thing I wanted to bring up. I've been seeing a lot about this growing movement in India focused on self-reliance.
Oh, yeah, especially in rural areas and among tribal groups.
Right, and it's not just about economics, right? It's about empowering people to take control of their own lives, their own communities.
It reminds me of Gandhi's idea of Swaraj.
Yes, exactly. Like that spirit is still alive today.
Definitely. And I think it's especially important for small farmers who are facing so many challenges these days. Climate change, rising costs, self-reliance can help them build a more sustainable future.
That's a great point. It's about resilience and having agency over your own destiny.
And creating a system that's more just and equitable.
Well said. And on that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive into the AI Samachar for today, January 17th, 2025.
Wow, it's flown by.
I know, right? We've covered everything from space exploration to women in politics to the future of agriculture. It's been a real whirlwind.
I always learn so much doing these with you.
Me too. And a huge thank you to all of you listening out there. We hope you found this deep dive informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, stay curious.